from Chicago, it's Startup Hype Man, the podcast. What's up, everyone? My name is Raj Nation, founder and chief pitch artist at Startup Hype Man, where we help startups, scale-ups, and grown-ups not suck at how they pitch themselves so they stand out to their audience and stand apart from the competition. This podcast is all about bringing you the hearts, the minds, and the stories of leaders in the startup ecosystem, talking through the strategies they have deployed in order to build and grow their companies. And it's officially season 17 of the show, and all season long we've got a special treat for you, bringing you guests exclusively from the Startup Hype Man client portfolio, giving you a piece of their journey. Before we begin, if you're not a subscriber yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And remember, you can catch all the episodes from our 17-season archive and learn how to pitch your startup at startuphypeman.com. All right, get your popcorn ready and get hyped because it's go time. Ladies and gentlemen, making his way to the microphone from Chicago, Illinois, and currently residing in Griffith, Indiana. He is the founder, CEO, and executive producer of the Elite Amateur Fight League. Please welcome Jesse Nunez.
I've heard that before.
Did I do right by you?
You did right. You did good.
He is Jesse Nunez, founder, CEO, and executive producer of the Elite Amateur Fight League. And this is a different startup than what we would typically have on the show. But all this season, we're featuring different clients, present and past, from the Startup Hype Man portfolio. And EAFL is a company that I've had the pleasure of working with over the past several years, both on helping with their fundraising pitch and also having the esteemed honor of being the official ring announcer for, I think, maybe 4 or 5 different events at this point, which has been a trip. And it's through that this podcast, I decided to start doing the announcer intros every time. So EAFL has had a major impact on me, and I'm excited to have Jesse here on the show today. EAFL has been around for 8 years now, if you can believe it, and they've expanded into 8 different premier markets throughout the United States. They've raised $100,000 in crowdfunding, and they've built TV deals over the years through NBCSports and the Marquee Sports Network. And this is a episode today. Our topic is specifically on scaling your distribution through unowned channels. And we're going to dive a whole lot more into that. But off the bat, Jesse, first off, thanks for being here. Thanks for being my guest today. Scaling distribution through unowned channels. Why is this on your mind? Why is this important to you?
Man, it's important to us because we need to reach past our standard demographic and audience that we bring into the fights. For us to grow as a business and as a media platform, we need distribution that helps us reach people that normally are not at our fights, are not watching us. And that's why an unowned distribution channel like a Marquee Sports Network is so important to us.
We are going to do a full conversation and deep dive into this. But before we do that, let's learn a little bit more about Jesse himself. Now, Jesse, we met through the Bunker Labs network. And for those listening who aren't familiar, Bunker Labs is basically an incubator and accelerator for businesses that are started and owned by military veteran entrepreneurs. That said, Jesse, you have a background being in the Marines, and I'm curious to know if you could pinpoint maybe your top 1 or 2 things that you could say, hey, the Marines taught me this. What would those 1 or 2 things be?
Absolutely. So when you're a Marine, they break you down, all the way to where you just need to be a great follower, and then you learn from great leaders. And I would think that's the biggest thing that I took away from the Marine Corps is you got to know how to follow to learn how to lead. And that really helped me in business to understand that, number one, all the traits of a good leader and all those things I've learned in the Marine Corps to bring that into business. And then, who the good employees are, because they're the ones who will follow your lead. And obviously you have to motivate them the same way you would a Marine to follow you up a mountain while people are shooting at you. Right. So, those are the things I think I can take away most out of my Marine Corps, experience is be a great follower, learn how to be a great leader.
Can you say a little bit more on what it does mean to be a follower? Because that's actually, and I'm sure it's like embedded in you being in the Marines, but I don't think the average person would say to be a great leader means you have to be a great follower. So how do you differentiate the two, and what does following mean in your case?
Well, in our case, they call it, be a great Marine, right? Learn how to take the lead from the Marines that are ahead of you. And in that case, like, you've got to have an open mind and realize that the people that are leading you, although you may not understand why that order is happening or why you were given that order, you have to follow it. There's a bigger plan. There's a reason they asked you to do that whatever it is that they're asking you to do. And you've got to have the faith in your leadership to be able to follow their orders and achieve the ultimate goal, whatever the end goal is. And through that, you eventually, the Marine Corps is great because eventually you become that corporal, you become that sergeant, you become that staff sergeant as you move your way up, and you understand why they were asking you to do these things. And maybe as a private and as a lance corporal, you don't quite get it, but you need to have faith that your leaders are leading you in the right direction, right? So I think by learning how to do that and learning why the hierarchy is the way it is, it'll help you achieve more as a leader by being in the place of the private.
I feel like if I enlisted, I would get kicked out on day one then, because I am always asking, why are we doing this? If I don't inherently understand it, I can't do the task unless I understand the why behind it. Right.
And let's be honest, there's times where there's not time to explain the why when you're in the Marine Corps, right? There's just not time. You have to live on the faith that your leaders are leading you in the right direction. And you got to go through with the mission.
So coming out of the Marine Corps, over a course of several years, you end up starting your own business prior to the EAFL. And you actually, for many years, actually ran an audiovisual company, Aztec Audiovisual. How did that come about? And I'm actually curious, not necessarily the function of running a company like that, but what made you say, hey, I can start my own business?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was timing, really, is what it came down to. I got out of the Marine Corps, joined the electrical union, local 134 as a low voltage electrician. And right as I joined that union, the building boom was happening. And, there were houses being built everywhere for ungodly amounts of money because the banks were giving it away. And I saw a need for low voltage, whole house audio, home theaters, that kind of stuff that were being put in these high-end homes. And I had that knowledge from, being a low voltage electrician in the union. So after the 4 years the 4 years I spent there to become a journeyman, I left and decided to start my own company where we built and designed high-end electronics in homes because the home market was just so great. And there were, there was a big building boom happening, right? So I just saw an opportunity to start a business. And so I left the union and decided to do that.
So this actually led to your first venture into television, right? Because you parlayed this business into a local TV show on building out man caves. Talk through how that opportunity came about and how do you end up on TV?
Yeah, again, timing and opportunity, man. You've got to take advantage of any opportunity that comes around when you're an entrepreneur. And so we were building these high-end electronic systems and realized the guys that were building the rooms were making more money than the electronics guys were. So, and they weren't doing as great of a job aesthetically as we would have had we built our own theater room or home bar, right? Because we knew what we wanted it to look like. The sound and the visuals were great from what we put on the electronic side, but the rooms were falling short. So we decided to start and design the rooms that our electronics were going into. That turned into a full-fledged build and design a man cave type of business, working with other contractors to do their part of the job, and then obviously implementing the high-end electronics that we would normally put in. Through that, I was having a lot of personal success. I had picked up some corporate clients at the time. We were doing the homes and things were going really well. And I left to play some professional poker. Not left.
Wait a second. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah. So I didn't leave, but I took some time aside to start playing some professional poker and did really well. Made a couple of the final tables.
In the World Series of Poker?
The World Series of Poker came to Chicago on their traveling circuit the first time I placed seventh.
Wow.
Then there's local competitions. One of them is the Windy City Poker Championship that is on NBC Sports Chicago. I made a bunch of their final tables. And because they needed to talk about me, they have you fill out a little dossier to kind of understand who you are. They have something to say, while you're playing. And so I build and design man caves. So they found that interesting, made friends with the producer, and that producer wanted a home poker room built. So we became friendly. I built this home poker room, and because he was in the business, he had some before and after cameras in the place, took a before and after shot and some video of the build out. And lo and behold, I won't get too far into it, but that turned into an opportunity to pitch a home improvement show where we built and designed man caves in the local area.
That's awesome. And from there, how do you then start? Like how does the journey into fighting happen and being a promoter for amateur fighting?
So we had a good long relationship with NBC Sports Chicago here, where they knew we were providing good content through the Man Card Crew, which was the home improvement show. And they were looking for MMA content. And I was able to view what they were putting on their station. And while the fights were good and the talent was good, the production value was horrible. And I knew I could do a better job. So what we decided to do was, is put together a show that we thought would work in the market, that followed MMA fighters that were up and coming fighters through their journey on their way up to the big time, right? Because once they get to the big time, they're not on NBC Sports Chicago anymore. They're on the UFC. So we knew where the hole was. And that was, no one was telling the stories for these guys. And that inherently leads to the problem we're trying to fix with the Elite Amateur Fight League. And I guess we'll get into that in the quick future here. But so we were able to develop this show called Fighter First, which was not the Elite Amateur Fight League, following up on these fighters and giving them good exposure and helping them build their fan base. So we were looking for where these amateur fighters compete on a national level so that we can follow them and tell that story. And what we quickly found is there is no national level of amateur MMA. It doesn't exist. They fight in a really segmented regional, a regional based promotion that really doesn't lend itself to growing a fan base for these fighters. It doesn't help them become or move on to the next level, right? It's very promotion centric. It's there so that the promoter can make money. And these fighters are basically the farm system for them to bring in viewers to watch their promotion and sell tickets. It's not really designed for the fighter to grow, become a marketable fighter and move on to the next level. And we found that as a huge problem. And the stories we were telling, while they were good, they never really hit the mark because there was no after story. The guy was stuck in that regional market for 7-8 years, and then they just fade away. And so that was the story.
It was like the loop didn't complete itself.
The loop didn't complete itself, right? So the story never really got anywhere, and there was never really anybody we can say, hey, came from this promotion and now he's in the UFC. And if that was the story, they really never relate it back to the promotion they started in. Mm-hmm. So it saw a huge hole in the market, a huge gap in the way the way the industry of MMA was run. And so we took a whole year of R&D to figure out, okay, how do we fix this problem? And while we were doing that, obviously the problem that everybody talks about today is fighter pay. We figured out why fighter pay is so low. It's the most dangerous sport in the world. And at the highest level, these guys are the lowest paid professional athletes in all of professional sports. Why is that? And how do we fix that? That's a problem. It's wrong. And what we found was they don't have any inherent value to the professional promotions coming out of the amateur ranks or even the low professional ranks. They have no fan base, so no one's going to follow them, right? They have no brand because nobody knows who they are. And if you compare that to the other leagues across the country that are doing really great things and that are really successful, it comes down to the NCAA provides a steady flow of athletes that have a brand and a following that people want to watch compete at the next level. That point guard from Duke makes millions of dollars before he ever dribbles a basketball in NBA. And that's simply because the NCAA builds up his brand, builds up his fan base so that he has value. And that's not happening in MMA. So that's where we found that the hole was. And while we could have created another professional promotion and tried to compete with the other 100 professional promotions where UFC has 90% of the market share. Doesn't make any sense to compete with them. We're not here to compete with them. We're here to be a steady provider of the athletes that will then compete in those larger leagues. And that was the missing gap. So our goal and our mission is always fighter centric. We're here to help fix the problem of fighter pay by giving them a national platform to help build their product, build their brand, and build their following so they have inherent value moving into the professional ranks.
Let's use that as our transition point into today's primary topic, which is scaling distribution through unowned channels. And I want to just make a couple vocabulary checks for the listeners. If you're not familiar with the world of mixed martial arts and amateur professional fighting, we will use the word promotion over and over again during this conversation. When we say promotion, we mean like the league, right? So EAFL as a league, like in the fighting world, it's known as a promotion. UFC is known as a promotion. And Bellator, those are all promotions. But what we mean is the league essentially. So you can think about it as like the equivalent of like the MLB or the NBA. And just to kind of help illustrate some of the things that you were saying, and this is pulling from some of the pitch stuff that we worked on, like, for those who aren't aware, listeners, if you're not in tune with the world of fighting, I just want to make sure that you understand that this, like the people you see on TV, on professional fighting, there was no NCAA of fighting for them. There was no, any major league baseball player went through the minor leagues first. There's no minor leagues, in an organized way anyway for fighting. And you have all these individual circuits, these individual promotions in Indiana, in Southern Illinois, in Arizona, wherever it might be, that's just pooling people who happen to live nearby and running fights. But there's not an orchestrated national network for amateurs to hone their craft and then essentially graduate up or get drafted up, if you will, to the professionals. And that's what EAFL is doing, is it's taking this individual circuit level of amateur fighting and creating a coordinated national promotion to create the platform and the opportunity for these fighters to get some exposure, to get better at fighting and fight good fighters around the country, and then have the best shot at making it to the pros. And even if they don't make it to the pros, well, hey, maybe the exposure means they get some media opportunities otherwise. Now, there's a couple other things I want to point out before we really get into, and I think it'll help understand why you're going the route you're going with how you distribute your product. Mm-hmm. And that's, I don't know if the listeners, I don't know if you caught this, but I caught it probably in the first 2 minutes, Jesse, when you started talking, and then you mentioned this word or these words a couple different times. You have referred to the EAFL as you've referred to it in the context of media, and you've called it a show. And I want to start there because I think it's really important to understand the lens at which you look at your own product. Because yes, it is a sports league, but I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're looking at it as more than just this is getting fighters together. And I want to hear, your perspective on this idea of looking at your product as a form of media and as a platform and as this show, if you will.
Right. Well, I mean, if you look at your sports leagues, successful ones, they are a media product. Let's just put that out there. The UFC was bought by a media conglomerate. Right? They weren't bought by a sports league. They were bought by somebody who knows how to distribute entertainment. And that's why we believe we're a media company as well. For us to achieve our goal of giving these fighters the value behind their name, we have to give them exposure. We have to give them an opportunity to compete in front of the masses, and that's a media product. Do we hold fights? Is it a sports league? It is. But at the end of the day, if we don't have distribution in an audience, we can't achieve our goal, right? So we are a media product, and that's why we refer to us as that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And for any founders who are listening to this, you have to really have that conversation with yourself of what what are we if we really take a good hard look at this? And I think that helps guide a lot of the decision making. So looking at the EAFL as a media product, if you look at a lot of up and coming companies, they will have this mindset of like, we have to build everything ourselves. We have to own every single asset that's out there. We need to have our own app. We need to use our own platform. We need to own the customer experience from start to finish and have dedicated eyeballs 100% of the time. But you've really gone the opposite route, right? Like you started off like very early on and carried through for several years broadcasting through someone else's platform, and that was NBC Sports. And that's a lot different than, say, building your own streaming network.
Yeah.
Talk through why you chose that route of other people, distributing through a network that you don't even own.
Right. I want to start by saying, Raj, you're right. The end goal is everything you just said, right? Having our own distribution network, having our own OTT, owning everything, right? But you can't start there, especially if you don't have, millions of dollars in the bank to help fund that. And when we started 8 years ago, OTT channels weren't even a thing. And if they were ultra expensive when they became available.
And when we say OTT, just to clarify, we're talking about the individual streaming networks.
Yep. Over the top television, which is individual streaming networks. And then when they did come around, there was Roku and there was some other big players where it cost a lot of money to develop that channel if they would even accept you. Over the years, it's gotten quite easy. It's gotten much easier and way more affordable. And I will tell you that 1 out of every 10 calls I get or emails is someone trying to sell me, you need to build your own OTT network. We can do it. Here's the pricing, very affordable. We can absolutely achieve this under your budget, which is completely true. But who's going to find me in the sea of other OTT channels? And if they do find me, I'm driving them there. They're my fan already. And they're following me either through social media or from a live event or from a fighter. And they're coming there and I've already have the touch point and have the reach to that person. For us to grow a media product, we need to reach outside of our reach, which is why we've chosen to go to broadcast linear distribution. Because while the NBC Sports or Marquee Sports Network isn't a national channel, I can tell you that in its market, it's on in every sports bar across the market. You walk into a Hooters, a BW3, any local sports bar, and that channel is on one of those TVs. So I'm going to gain an audience that I didn't have access to. And that's the key to it, because we want to grow. And we're not going to grow if we don't reach outside of the people that we normally touch that are our normal clients.
So that to me sounds like you're embracing the long game here, right? And you're looking at this as building up over time. Also, I think the other thing that I'm hearing with that is you're deciding like, what game do you want to play? Not just with the long game, short game, but like what battles do you want to fight, quote unquote, in the sense of like, I think if you build your own you build your own streaming network from the start, now you have to not only put on a good product, but you have to be solely responsible for getting people to view that. So you have to build like an you have to figure out how to build like an advertising platform to get people to you just to be able to view your actual product. And I'm imagining it's not worth bifurcating your attention like that.
Right. And the money to achieve what we needed to in marketing isn't the kind of money we had at the time. And still, we don't have that kind of marketing budget for us to advertise for people to find us on our own network. But I do know that Marquee has that money. And I know that NBC has that money, and they're well established in those areas where we're going to get residual fan base just from their channel alone. So for us, you're exactly right. We're picking our battles on and more where we're going to dedicate the money we have to help grow our product. And if someone else can do that for us, that's the route we're going to go.
Can you share like what it is like to actually get on television, right? And you mentioned the poker stuff is how you got through to NBC Sports in the first place, and then that led to Fighter First, and then it led to pitching the show. But like, what is that process like? I don't think anyone off the street can just go pitch NBC.
Right, and I'll tell you, the way I got into it probably isn't the standard way to do it, right? And I wasn't a television guy. I didn't go to school to produce television. So I guess my experience is way different than most people. So this answer is going to sound far-fetched and not real. For me, it was just taking advantage of opportunities and the relationships that I built with other businesses. And it led me to opportunities to then pitch a product that I was passionate about and that had good legs, right? So that's not your normal way in. I mean, I couldn't even tell you what the normal way in because I didn't take the normal way in. I totally came at this opportunity through relationships and building a product. So I really can't answer that question.
Well, maybe we can look at it from a different way then, or a different part of that question, which would be, they agree to air your show. Do you have any say in when it's going to go on and what markets it's going to get broadcast to, et cetera?
So, and when we broke in, right, I'll be quite honest, we were paying for our time with the Man Card crew. It wasn't they loved it so much. Hey, Jesse, we're going to pay you money and we're going to put you on and you're going to have these great time slots. It wasn't that at all. It was, all right, we think the content matches our viewership. We think it's good enough to put on television, but you're unproven, so you're going to have to buy your way in. Mm-hmm. So we were buying the placement of our show, and the more I paid, the better time slots I got. And if it was available, because I have to compete with the White Sox, the Bulls, and the Blackhawks that all run at the time slots that I really want, right? So, we were on Saturday and Sunday mornings when there was no baseball, hockey, or basketball, but it made a lot of sense for the home improvement crowd that would have that channel on and were sports related, right? They were watching the follow-up on the game, and then it led them into a show that would kind of built and designed man caves that they could watch sports in. And so for us, we bought our way in and then we proved ourselves, and it led to other opportunities with other broadcasters and other conversations because we had a history of producing good content.
How important do you think that notion of I know there's a term in it for TV. I just don't know what it is, but that idea of a piggybacked time slot, right? Where you don't get the prime time, but you get after prime time because there's going to be some spillover audience who didn't change the channel yet.
Yeah, I think in a scenario where it's in a sports bar, that makes a lot of sense, right? If we're on right after the basketball game or the baseball game, everybody was there to watch. They are, they're not leaving. They're still going to finish their beer and they may watch my show. And that's what happened with the Elite Amateur Fight League on NBC, that we were always taking those spillover time slots to try to gain more access to that audience. So it does help. And obviously having content on that relates to your target demographic before you go on is ultra important, and another reason why we're on linear television.
So let's maybe you can speak more then, because you mentioned it early on in this conversation. Can you speak more to this kind of bigger vision of reaching the demographic that's not just the hardcore MMA fighting fan?
Right. And so, and that's, and I'll speak to that because I think that's a problem with moving the sport along. You're either a hardcore MMA fan or you're not an MMA fan right now. And I think, and not only do I think, but it's proven that the majority of sports fans are casual sports fans. And I think you can look at the proof of that here in Chicago through the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks weren't on television at one point. They had a very small fan base. They turned it around, produced a great team. And then all of a sudden, everybody was a Blackhawks fan. But if you polled 50% of those people, they had no idea the rules of hockey. They didn't know about hockey, but they were Blackhawks fans, right? And that's your casual sports fan. And
that was me actually. The year before the year they're leading into their first Stanley Cup in 2009 or whatever it was. I had roommates who liked hockey. I didn't care, but then I started watching hockey, and as I was becoming a Blackhawks fan, I was also learning the rules of hockey.
Right, and that was happening to a lot of people during that time, right? And so that's the point: is there aren't a lot of casual MMA fans, and that's why our unique team versus team platform, I think, will bring in the casual sports fan. You may not be maybe you're a fan of one guy, but he's on he's on the Chicago Inferno, and you watch Joe fight. And then you watch John fight, and next thing you know, you become a casual fan of the team. And while they may move on, you're still a fan of the Chicago Inferno, right? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring that casual sports fan who's tied to the sport via either peer relations or geographical location, into the sport of MMA. And that's why we've developed a really unique team versus team platform.
And I think it also speaks to the benefit of running your distribution through other networks and not your own, because if you're trying to build up a fan base behind a team, I mean, again, it's a lot harder if you're just trying to get it. If the majority of the effort is just getting people to find it in the first place, like that can't be where the battle is fought, right? It has to be in them already being able to see it easily and decide if they like it or not, right?
Absolutely. And that's, again, I mean, that's the beauty of being on a linear channel that plays to the local, sports fan base.
I want to go a little bit more into this idea of the long game versus the short game. But before I do, I just want to take a quick step back and talk to our listeners for a moment about Google Analytics and about what's happening on your website. Maybe you've got Google Analytics and maybe you hate it. And if I polled a room, I bet, the majority of that room would probably raise their hand. And it's difficult because understanding where and why you lose site visitors before they convert is pretty dang hard. With GA, there's always some integration issue, or you got to sort through a mountain of data just to figure out what's causing your leads to drop off. It's just not fun to deal with. It's kind of a nightmare even. And that's why I was really excited to learn of a better way to measure website analytics. And that's this company called Oribi. Oribi is a unique marketing analytics tool that captures all the events visitors perform on your website without you having to use any code. So Oribi enables you to analyze visitor behavior patterns. It allows you to build smart funnels and get tons of insights so you always know what your next step is, which means finally you can understand your visitors and know what to change on your site in order to convert more of your visitors into customers, aka no more blind spots on your website. Now, Oribi is a new partner of the show, and you can start your free trial today at oribi.io/today. That's oribi.io/today. And as a partner of the show, they've got a special 20% off coupon code for you. Just use the code HYPEMAN, all one word. Type in HYPEMAN at the checkout for 20% off any plan. That's oribi.io/today, oribi.io/today. On this episode of Startup Hype Man, the podcast, we are with Jesse Nunez from the Elite Amateur Fight League, talking about how they are scaling their distribution through unowned or external channels. Now, before the break there, Jesse, I mentioned wanting to touch on this idea of the long game versus the short game. Knowing that you have a bigger picture vision and the goal is eyeballs over time and getting this product in front of people, how do you balance or juxtapose that against the need to keep this thing going in the short term as well? And as a result, what would you say, or not what would you say, what are the actual metrics and KPIs that you're focused on?
Yeah. So obviously it's still a business, right? So we've got to be able to fund, to fund exactly what we need to do to get to the end game. And for us, I compare it to a gas tank, right? You got to have enough gas in the tank to get to where you're going. And our events need to help us fund and fill that gas tank. So having successful local events with fans in attendance, and then parlaying that content into distribution content that we could then sell ad space on. It also is a great opportunity for us to upsell the sponsorships of the live events, because we're not just offering a corner pad for a one-time event in front of 1,000 or 2,000 people. We're offering them a corner pad at a live event with 1,000 or 2,000 people that they can physically touch, as well as replay distribution across the spectrum of our broadcast partners. And while we're on Marquee Sports Network today, we're already talking with some of the larger national OTT channels that have distribution of sports out there. So you're going to find us on Stadium here real soon. And that's a national OTT channel geared toward the sports market, also owned by Sinclair Broadcasting. So it allows us and it helps us fund the growth of the company simply because now we can upsell our sponsorships, give them more return on investment by working with us, because we have a larger distribution network than just a live event.
Now, with these different channels, for example, right, like EAFL was on NBC Sports for a few years, and then Comcast, who owns NBC, says, hey, we're going to sunset all these NBC sports channel, these regional channels. So from my outside perspective, it seemed like almost like without missing a step, Marquee Sports Network, which for those who aren't based in Chicago, who aren't close sports followers, Marquee Sports Network is the dedicated network of the Chicago Cubs that launched about a year or two ago. So every single Chicago Cubs game is broadcast on the Marquee Sports Network. Was it like the same people who were working at NBC Sports just started working at Marquee, and then like that connection was made? But how did you just kind of like go straight from one network into another?
Well, there's opportunity and relationship building. That's the strength of every good business, right? You've got to know who your friends are. You've got to build relationships with people. Then you got to supply a great product. The NBC Sports regional networks are still around. It's the national NBC Sports channel that got sunset, right? And that'll end, I think, in 2 days. They're done. But your NBC Sports Chicago, your NBC Sports Philly, NBC Sports, the other 6 channels are still out there and available. The truth is here for us is we were competing with 3 teams for good programming time. You're competing with the White Sox, the Bulls, and the Blackhawks. Over on Marquee, it's just the Cubs, right? So when there's not a Cubs game on, obviously they want good sports content, and it was a better opportunity for us to move over there. And that's really where the move came from. I will always thank NBC for giving us our shot initially to get on television and bring the product over there. But as we grew, I felt our opportunities weren't growing there. And with the sunset of the national NBC Sports channel, there was no end game. So, we decided to move to an opportunity that was better for the distribution of our product, seemed to favor what we wanted to do, and was looking to work with us on the digital side as well as the linear side. So those are the real reasons we moved. And as far as how we moved over there, it was a relationship built through NBC Sports where, yes, obviously some of that Chicago talent's going to jump ship and go over to the new network. And that's exactly what happened. And we were able to just maintain those relationships and pitch our opportunity.
Yeah. And to your point of, Marquee only broadcast the Cubs. I mean, I'm sure it's a profitable play for these networks, but like, I always wonder how these networks keep going when they build an entire network for one team, because outside of Cubs games, there's only so many pregame, postgame, and then like the Ron Santo documentary shows that you can actually air. But for even the most diehard Cubs fan is like, all right, I think I've had enough of my fix of this one type of content over and over.
I believe there's only a couple teams in this country that can do it. And one of them is probably the Cowboys, the Cubs.
The Yankees have it.
The Yankees, right? I mean, those teams with those really hardcore, large fan bases can float that. But most teams, I don't think, can do that.
Well, a couple more questions before we begin our wrap up. One of them is, as you look at the future of distribution and streaming networks, you mentioned stadiums coming up. There's other platforms that are out there or networks that are out there like Fight TV, Fubo, right?
Hey.
How are you looking at the future of streaming, and specifically in the sense of the other networks that are out there? Because I know you said EAFL at some point will build its own when you hit a certain critical mass, but do you view this as like there's a lot of oversaturation, or this is a good thing that a lot of different networks are coming out and it creates a lot of opportunity for your promotion?
I think there's a lot of opportunity for good content that can lead engagement. And to that point, I think the future of the sports broadcasting is going to revolve around engagement, and mainly through sports betting. I think sports betting is the next evolution of sports television. You can look at that because the biggest media conglomerate in the United States, which is Sinclair Broadcasting, just recently bought all the Fox Sports networks and converted them to the Bally Sports Network. Bally's is a gaming company, right? And so you've got Bally Sports San Diego, Bally Sport Indiana, Bally Sports Wisconsin. There's a reason why they're named Bally Sports, and that's because you're going to be able to bet on, you're going to be able to watch, bet, and win all on the same channel, right? And we see that as the future. And that's why we've been talking to the gaming entities out there. Fubo TV is now Fubo Gaming, if you didn't know that.
That's right, yeah.
They have a Fubo Gaming channel, right? So we're talking to everybody we possibly can to make sure we're ahead of that curve when it comes to broadcast distribution of engaging sports television. And then also being able to be a bettable entity. It takes a lot of work and a lot of legislation to be a legal betting entity within some of these sports books. So we're following that pattern. We see it coming, and we're going to stay ahead of that curve. And I won't say too much, but we're working on it.
Okay, so you view then the future of your product being live and interactive, like for the viewer at home.
Yeah, our scenario is bet, watch, win. Really is what it comes down to. We need to provide an opportunity for them to pick winners, watch our content, and possibly win some cash. And I think that's the way the whole sports industry is moving.
Let's begin our wrap up. Jesse, first off, where can our listeners find you and find the EAFL and learn more?
Yeah, our biggest social media platform right now is Facebook. So you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can watch us on Marquee Sports Network, soon Stadium Network as well. And then you could always reach out via our website, EAFLMMA.com. If you have any questions, if you want to come see a show, we have live shows all over the country. Our next schedule is going to be March, June, August, with an April date pending. Most of them will be in the Midwest, as well as we're working on an Arizona date as well. So yeah, keep on the lookout, check in on all our social media, come see a show, because once you see a show, you'll be hooked. And Raj will back me on that.
This is very true. And yeah, if you happen to tune into the Marquee Network, you'll see me on that screen introducing these fighters. So I got to thank you're the reason that I've made it on TV on NBC and Marquee Sports Network, which is pretty cool. I joke with friends. I'm like, I'm keeping the Marquee Network alive, not the Cubs. All right. So who is one person who you want to shout out who has been helpful in your journey?
Yeah, I think my biggest shout out would be to our main investor. I won't get into his name because he doesn't like to be. He shall be unnamed, I guess, or however they explain.
He shall, yeah. He shall remain nameless.
He shall remain nameless. But he's been a huge help, not only from a financial standpoint, but from a advice and historical backdrop of him having the opportunity to work with us and guide us through some of our financial decisions, as well as just brand building and knowing which battles to fight, right? He's got the experience, and he's a huge MMA fan. So not only does he understand the business side of things, but he understands what our goal and believes in our mission, which at the end of the day is fighter-centric. As much as I want to sit there and talk about the product and what we do, the true reason we're going to be successful is why we do it. And that's simply because these fighters, it's a travesty that these fighters are the lowest paid professional athletes in the country. And you can't fix the problem without fixing the cause. And we're here to fix the cause of the problem. And if we can do that, we know we'll be successful. So big shout out to he who shall remain nameless, but he's helped us, get to that, to that story and that pattern.
Let's go ahead and do our top one or two lessons or takeaways based on today's discussion. I'll go first and I'll toss it to you. The topic today was scaling distribution through unowned channels. I think my biggest takeaway from this discussion is you have to be really honest with yourself about what type of company are we building. Once you know what type of company you're building, then you know what the appropriate distribution and overall strategy should be. Jesse, top one or two lessons or takeaways for the listeners?
I think the top takeaway from our conversation today, honestly, is to follow your why, right? While we could talk about distribution and scaling, the true message is why we do what we do. And I think that's what will be most engaging to the fans. And so I need to stay on the topic of exactly what our mission is and why we do it for us to be successful.
My final question, which is how we end every episode of this show, fill in the blank, Jesse. Entrepreneurship is blank.
Testing. It
Why
tests
that?
it tests your mettle at the end of the day, right? You're going to have days when you win. You're going to have days when you lose. And it's going to be a roller coaster ride. There's days I win and lose in the same day. Heck, and there's days I win and lose in the same hour as an entrepreneur. And you've just got to really be able to work through those roller coaster days, the down days, the up days. Don't get too high, don't get too low. And it really tests your mettle. If you're not a guy who or a gal or someone who likes to be tested or challenged, don't be an entrepreneur, because it's going to test you every day, sometimes every hour. And you've got to be able to get through it to be successful. And that's why entrepreneurship is testing.
He is Jesse Nunez from the Elite Amateur Fight League. Jesse, thank you so much for joining today on Startup Hype Man, the podcast.
Come see a fight, brother.
That does it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and leave a rating and review in your podcast app, or do us one better. Hit the share button. Send this episode to one friend who you think needs to hear it. While you're on your way out, don't forget to follow Startup Hype Man on Instagram and LinkedIn at Startup Hype Man. And remember, you can also connect with today's guest as well. They left their contact info. They love hearing if what they shared helped you in any way. StartupHypeMan.com is the place to catch the full 17 season archive and learn all about how to pitch your startup. We'll see you next week, but until then, stay hyped. Raj Nation out.